At 10:47 p.m., the sound of a car door shutting echoed through the quiet suburban street. It was the last ordinary sound Lisa Miller would hear for the next 7 years. Inside the house, a single gunshot shattered the predictable silence of the evening. But what no one realized at the time, as police flooded the driveway and neighbors gathered behind yellow tape, was that the truth was already right in front of them. They were wrong. This case would remain unsolved for 7 years. Not because of a lack of evidence, not because of a missing weapon or absent witnesses, but because of one detail everyone overlooked, a detail recorded, filed away, and forgotten in the chaotic first hours of the investigation. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what went wrong, and why that single oversight allowed a killer to walk free, while an innocent woman's world was systematically dismantled. This is Behind the Crime Files, where we explore the stories, psychology, and motives behind real crimes. The town of Cedar Springs is the kind of place people describe as good for raising a family. It has a historic downtown with a single coffee shop, a library that hosts summer reading programs, and well-kept parks. Crime statistics, as reported by the Cedar Springs Sentinel, mostly involve petty theft or occasional vandalism. The violent crime rate is 63% below the national average. It is a community built on a feeling of safety. Number 214 Maple Drive was a part of that tapestry. David Miller, 42, was a regional sales manager for an industrial supply company. Colleagues quoted in initial news reports described him as reliable, a straight shooter, and family-oriented. His LinkedIn profile showed steady career progression over 15 years. Lisa Miller, 39, worked part-time at the Cedar Springs Public Library. Her social media, before it was all set to private, was a chronicle of small-town life. Photos of her son's science fair projects, a vegetable garden, an anniversary trip to a bed and breakfast. The two boys, Ethan and Josh, were involved in soccer and Boy Scouts. Financial records obtained during the investigation show a typical American middle-class picture. A mortgage with 22 years left. 2 car payments. Some credit card debt, totaling about $15,000 across 3 cards. They had a standard $250,000 life insurance policy through David's employer, a common benefit. There were no secret accounts, no massive hidden loans. This ordinariness, this very predictability, would later become a cage. Because when something shatters a life this normal, the mind seeks an explanation that fits within the known world. The unknown, the random act of malice from outside, is often too terrifying to accept. November 12th was a Tuesday. The weather was unseasonably mild. Josh had a math test the next day, and Lisa had quizzed him at the kitchen table after dinner. Ethan was playing a video game in the living room. David was in his home office, finishing up some emails. According to Lisa's later statements, the evening was unremarkable. At approximately 10:25 p.m., David closed his laptop. He told Lisa the hinge on the backyard gate was loose and he wanted to tighten it first thing in the morning. He couldn't find the right screwdriver in the kitchen junk drawer. "I think it's in the garage," he said. "I'll go grab it now so I don't forget." Lisa nodded, heading upstairs with a basket of laundry. She heard the door from the kitchen to the interior garage open and close. At 10:47 p.m., a neighbor's Nest doorbell camera, 3 houses down, captured a dark-colored sedan, later described as a possible Chrysler 300 or similar, slowing to a near stop in front of the Miller residence. The car's headlights were off, but its parking lights were illuminated. The video quality was too poor to capture a license plate or clear images of the driver. This footage was collected by police but, with no immediate context, was initially categorized as incidental. At 10:48 p.m., another neighbor, walking his dog, heard what he thought was a firecracker or a car backfiring. He didn't see anything and continued his walk. Inside the Miller home, Lisa heard the sound from the laundry room. In her interrogation, she stated, "It was loud, but flat. I thought maybe David had knocked over a shelf or a toolbox." She called out, "David? You okay?" Silence. She called again, louder. "Nothing. A feeling," she described, "like cold water spreading in my chest." She walked downstairs. The kitchen was empty. The door to the garage was open about 2 inches. The light was on. She pushed the door open. The scene was both simple and catastrophic. David was on his back on the concrete floor, near his workbench. His eyes were open. There was a small, dark hole in the center of his plaid shirt, already surrounded by a spreading stain. A single, spent brass shell casing gleamed near the rear tire of the family's SUV. Lisa's subsequent actions were described in the first officer's report. She did not step into the garage. She did not touch her husband. She backed into the kitchen, picked up the cordless phone on the wall, and dialed 911. The call lasts 3 minutes and 22 seconds. Operator. 911. What is your emergency? Lisa's voice is breathy, high-pitched. My husband. He's in the garage. I think he's been shot. Operator. Is he breathing? Lisa. A pause, the sound of a shaky inhale. I don't think so. There's blood. Operator. I'm sending officers and an ambulance right now. Stay on the line with me. Is the person who shot him still there? Lisa. I don't know. I didn't see anyone. The garage door was open. The big door is shut. Operator. Are you in a safe place? Lisa. I'm in the kitchen. I can't go back in there. Her words are punctuated by sharp, shallow breaths. But listen to the background. Beyond her voice, there is the hum of the refrigerator, a faint tick of a clock, and at the 1-minute 34-second mark, a subtle, low-frequency crunch. A soft, metallic thud. It's easily mistaken for static or the sound of the phone against her clothing. Officer Derek Vance was the first to arrive at 10:54 p.m. His cruiser's dashboard camera shows his approach. The front door of the Miller house is open, light spilling out. But Lisa Miller is not in the doorway. She is standing on the lawn, to the left of the driveway, wrapped in a thick, floral-patterned blanket. A neighbor, an older woman, is standing several feet away, her hand over her mouth. Vance's body cam footage shows him approaching Lisa. Ma'am, are you the one who called? She nods, her face pale and waxy under the streetlight. He's in the garage. Did you see anyone? No. Is anyone else in the house? My boys. They're upstairs asleep. Please don't let them come down. Vance notes in his report her demeanor. He writes, the witness was calm but shaking. She made eye contact, but her gaze was distant. She did not ask about her husband's condition. She did not attempt to re-enter the residence or move toward the garage. She remained fixed in position on the lawn. This observation was the first brick in a wall that would be built around her. In the moment, it was a passing note. In the context of the investigation that followed, it became a cornerstone of suspicion. The responding officers, paramedics, and detectives all entered the house and garage past the still, silent figure on the grass. But why would a grieving wife choose to stand outside, away from her husband? Was it shock or something else? And what about the sound on the 911 call? The answer to that would take 7 years to uncover, but the pieces were already there, waiting to be connected. The initial investigation was a whirlwind of activity. Crime scene technicians photographed the garage. The shell casing was a 9mm Luger, a common caliber. No gun was found. David's wallet held $87 in cash and credit cards. His keys were in his pocket. The family's laptop and a tablet were in the living room in plain sight. The large, roll-up garage door was locked from the inside. The only points of entry were the interior kitchen door and a standard, locked side door. Detectives interviewed the neighbors. The man walking his dog heard the shot but saw nothing. The neighbor with the doorbell camera provided the grainy footage of the dark sedan. Several other neighbors reported hearing the shot, but no screams, no screeching tires. The street had simply absorbed the violence and gone quiet again. By sunrise, the theory of a random, interrupted burglary was already cracking. Nothing was missing. Why would a burglar shoot a homeowner and then flee empty-handed? Why enter through the interior door? It didn't fit. Homicide detectives, according to their later court testimony, began to operate on a principle often quoted in law enforcement: Look at the family first. It's a grim statistic, but a reality. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's Crime Data Explorer shows that in solved homicide cases where the victim knew the offender, nearly 30% of female victims are killed by an intimate partner, and a significant percentage of male victims are also killed by someone known to them. The focus turned inwards to 214 Maple Drive. Lisa Miller was brought to the station on the afternoon of November 13th for a formal statement. It was not an arrest, but she was placed in an interview room. The videotape of this interview, later used in her trial, is a masterclass in how grief can be interpreted as guilt. She is exhausted. Her eyes are swollen. She accepts a cup of water with trembling hands. The two detectives, a man and a woman, adopt a sympathetic but persistent tone. Detective: Lisa, walk us through last night again. You went upstairs to fold laundry. Did you and David argue at all before that? Lisa: No, we didn't. Detective: We've heard from some people that money was a bit tight. Was that a stress? Lisa sighs. Sometimes. Who doesn't stress about money? It wasn't a fight. It was just life. The detectives then present her with a simplified timeline. They note the brief window of opportunity, the few minutes between David going to the garage and the gunshot. They suggest the killer had to have been lying in wait or was let in. Detective: The side garage door was locked. The big door was down. So someone either came through your house, Lisa, or was already in the garage. Did you let anyone in? Lisa: No, of course not. Detective: Could David have been expecting someone? Maybe someone he didn't want you to know about. Lisa looks confused, then distressed. I don't think so. Here, criminal psychologists analyzing this tape later noted a critical inflection point. The detectives are offering an out, a potential unknown third party. Lisa, in her traumatized state, does not seize it. She does not wildly speculate or blame a mysterious stranger. She sticks to the simple, terrifying truth she knows. She didn't let anyone in, and she doesn't know why this happened. To the detectives, her lack of theory, her passive acceptance of the mystery, reads as evasive. As one consultant on a documentary about the case put it, in an interrogation, innocence often looks like helplessness. Guilt often looks like someone trying too hard to be helpful. Lisa was trapped in the helplessness, and the system interpreted that as a void to be filled with their own narrative. The detectives circle back to her behavior on the lawn. They ask why she didn't stay with David. She looks at them, her expression blank with a kind of horror. He was gone. I could see it. What was I supposed to do? The tone is not defensive, but utterly lost. It does not play well to a jury. Over the next weeks, the investigation into Lisa's life became its own invasion. Forensic accountants combed the family finances. They found the credit card debt. They noted a $500 overdraw on the checking account from 2 months prior. They discovered David had withdrawn $5,000 from a joint savings account 6 months earlier to pay for a new roof. A normal expense, but now framed as financial strain. Detectives interviewed friends. One, Sarah Tillman, mentioned under pressure that Lisa had been frustrated with David's long hours a few times. This was transformed in police notes into, the wife expressed resentment over husband's absence. The physical evidence remained stubbornly absent. No gunshot residue was found on Lisa's hands or clothing. Her prints were not on the shell casing. No blood spatter was on her. The murder weapon was never located. There was no history of domestic violence calls. No passionate affair discovered. Yet, the pressure to solve the murder of a well-liked man in a safe community was immense. The district attorney's office, reviewing the circumstantial picture, the money stress, the lack of forced entry, Lisa's calm demeanor, decided it was enough. They believed a jury would connect the dots. 7 months after David's death, as Lisa was helping her sons get ready for school, detectives arrived at her sister's home where they were temporarily staying. They arrested Lisa Miller for the murder of her husband. The local news headline read, "Wife charged in suburban slaying." The case against her was entirely circumstantial. So how did she end up convicted? The trial reveals how easily a story can replace evidence. The trial of State versus Lisa Miller in 2014 was a local spectacle. The prosecution's opening statement wove a tale not of a premeditated execution, but of a spontaneous argument that turned deadly. They argued Lisa and David fought over money that night. She followed him to the garage, a gun was produced, perhaps one they owned for protection that was later disposed of, and she shot him in a moment of rage. Then, she staged the scene and performed the 911 call. The evidence presented was selective. 1. The financial records showing debt. 2. Testimony from the neighbor about the calm woman on the lawn. 3. The 911 call, which the prosecutor played twice, asking the jury to listen not for distress, but for theatrics. 4. The testimony of Detective Vance, who described Lisa's controlled and distant behavior that night. The defense countered with the lack of physical evidence. No gun, no GSR, no motive beyond ordinary marital stress. They presented Lisa as a devoted mother, a woman with no history of violence. They argued the real killer was an unknown person, the one in the dark sedan. The prosecution's closing argument was devastatingly simple. The attorney pointed at Lisa, who sat silently at the defense table. She was there. Her husband is dead. Nothing was stolen. No one else was seen. She benefits from his life insurance. She tells a story that makes no sense for a burglary. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. She did it. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On the third day, they returned a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Lisa showed no reaction, a final display of control that some reporters noted. She was sentenced to life without parole. As she was led away, her youngest son, Ethan, then 10, screamed, "Mommy," from the gallery. She did not turn around. That moment was captured by a courtroom artist and splashed across the news. In the aftermath of the conviction, the case file was essentially closed. Boxes of evidence were moved to long-term storage. Among these items was a chain of custody form for a latent palm print. It had been lifted from the passenger side door handle of David Miller's sedan, which was parked in the driveway that night. The print was not David's. It was not Lisa's. The forensic technician had logged it as latent print, vehicle, possible unsub. Unsub, unknown subject. With Lisa convicted, there was no reason to run it against any further databases. It was a dead end filed away. Similarly, the neighbor's doorbell camera footage and the audio file of the 911 call were stored on CDs in a cardboard box. The dark sedan was deemed an unexplained anomaly. The faint crunch on the 911 call was never isolated or analyzed. It was just background noise. For 7 years, Lisa Miller lived in a prison cell. Her sons were raised by David's sister, who believed wholeheartedly in Lisa's guilt. The boys were told their mother had killed their father in a fit of anger. They visited her sporadically, the visits strained and full of a pain too deep for words. Lisa maintained her innocence in every parole hearing, which meant she was never seen as remorseful and was always denied. But in 2019, a digital stranger would hear a detail everyone else had missed, and the entire terrible machine of the past 7 years would begin to grind into reverse. The Behind the Tape True Crime podcast, known for deep dives into court records, aired an episode on Lisa Miller in October 2019. The host, Jason Hale, had obtained the trial transcripts and the 911 call through a Freedom of Information request. He played the call in full during the episode. A listener named Martin Riggs, a sound engineer for a film studio in Los Angeles, was driving while listening. The segment with the 911 call played. Something pricked at his professional ear. That faint crunch and thud. He emailed the podcast. There's a clear vehicle egress sound buried in the call around the 1:30 mark. It's masked by her voice, but it's there. Someone left after she was already on the phone. The podcast team brought Riggs on for a follow-up episode. Using professional audio isolation software, he filtered out the primary frequencies of Lisa's voice and the operators. What was left was the ambient bed of sound. He amplified it. The result was chillingly clear. The crunch of gravel under a tire, the low groan of a car suspension, the definitive clunk of a car door closing. and then the very faint, low rumble of an engine moving away. This sequence occurred at approximately 10:52 and 15 seconds p.m. This changed everything. If Lisa was the shooter, who was in this car? An accomplice? Why would they leave after the police were called? If it was the killer, it meant they had stayed at the scene for over 4 minutes after the gunshot. This was not a panicked burglar. This was someone waiting, watching. The podcast episode detailing this analysis went viral in true crime circles. It caught the attention of the Innocence Project of the Great Lakes, a non-profit dedicated to overturning wrongful convictions. Attorneys from the organization filed a motion for post-conviction relief based on new evidence. They also subpoenaed the entire physical evidence file from the original case. It took 3 months to locate the box in a county storage facility. Inside, among the tag bags and photos, was the forgotten forensic report on the latent palm print from David Miller's car. The print was digitally scanned and submitted to the FBI's next-generation identification database, which had expanded dramatically since 2013. In March 2020, a hit came back. The print belonged to Carl Michael Jenner, 48. A search of his records revealed a history, an arrest for aggravated assault in 2005, and a conviction for embezzlement and fraud in 2008. He had served 18 months in a minimum security prison. The connection? The company he had embezzled from was Midwest Industrial Supply. David Miller had worked for a competitor, National Industrial Supply, at the time. But a deeper dive into business records showed that before his conviction, Jenner had worked for National Industrial. He and David had been colleagues. More than that, David had been the one to uncover the accounting irregularities and had reported them to management. Jenner had blamed David Miller for his downfall. The revenge plot was now clear. But how did he do it? And why did it work so perfectly? Police, now with a new suspect, tracked down Carl Jenner. He was living in a rented apartment in a city 200 miles away, working as a freelance bookkeeper. When detectives approached him, he initially seemed confused, then resigned. He waived his right to an attorney almost immediately. In a subsequent interview, he laid it out with cold clarity. He had never stopped blaming David. Prison had embittered him. Losing his career, his wife, his standing had festered into an obsession. He decided David had to suffer a loss equal to his own. "I didn't just want him dead," Jenner stated on the recording. "I wanted his whole life destroyed. I wanted his name ruined. I wanted his family to suffer like mine did." He had stalked the Millers for months, learning patterns. He knew David often went into the garage in the evenings. He chose a common, untraceable 9mm pistol purchased years before on the black market. On the night of November 12th, he parked his dark Chrysler down the street, walked to the house, and waited in the shadows beside the driveway. When he saw David enter the garage from the house, he made his move. He entered the garage just as David turned to the workbench. David saw him, startled. Jenner said he simply said, "You remember me, Dave?" and fired once. It was execution style. Then he didn't flee. His plan entered its second phase. He needed to plant the seed of doubt. He put on gloves, opened the passenger door of David's car in the driveway, and leaned in, pretending to look for something, ensuring he left a palm print on the door handle. A print that should point to an unknown intruder. He then quietly closed the car door. He returned to his own vehicle, which he had parked just far enough away not to be immediately visible. He waited. He heard Lisa scream from inside the house. He saw the kitchen light go on. He watched through the garage windows as she discovered the body and ran back inside. He started his car but didn't leave. He waited for her to call 911, which he knew she would do. He needed the police to be coming. He needed the scene to be active. When he heard her voice from the front lawn, talking to the operator, he knew it was time. He calmly put his car in gear and rolled slowly away, without headlights, confident the chaos he had created would do the rest of his work for him. He knew about the statistical likelihood of spouse suspicion. He was counting on it. His revenge was the 7 years Lisa spent in prison, the boys growing up without either parent, the total annihilation of the Miller family. Lisa Miller was released in a quiet procedural hearing in May 2021. The legal process was anticlimactic. The state, confronted with the palm print match and Jenner's confession, joined the defense's motion to vacate the conviction. The emotional reckoning happened in a private conference room at the Innocence Project's offices later that day. Lisa was there with her lead attorney, Sarah Chun, and a victim's advocate. Sarah laid out photos of Karl Jenner and explained the history, the embezzlement, David's role, the long-held grudge. According to Sarah Chun, in an interview with The Guardian, Lisa was silent for a full minute. She stared at Jenner's photo, a man she had never seen before. Then her face, which had been held in a tense, weary mask for years, completely collapsed. It wasn't a loud wail, but a deep, shuddering unraveling. She curled forward, her body shaking with waves of what Chen described as grief, rage, and a profound, world-altering confusion all at once. The core of her suffering for 7 years had been the incomprehensible why. Why was her husband taken? Why was she accused? Now she had a why, and it was more monstrous than she could have imagined. Her husband was killed for doing the right thing. She was destroyed as collateral damage in a revenge plot. The ordinary safety of their world had been an illusion, shattered by a hatred they never saw coming. He took everything, Lisa reportedly whispered through tears. And you all let him. Karl Jenner pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was given a life sentence without parole. He showed no remorse in his allocution, stating only that justice was served for what David did to him. For the others, there is no clean resolution. The original detectives faced an internal review but were not formally disciplined. They stated they followed the evidence as they saw it at the time. One retired shortly after. The other remains on the force, telling a reporter, "We got it wrong. I have to live with that." David's sister, Carol, had raised Ethan and Josh with the belief their mother was a murderer. She issued a public apology, but the relationship with Lisa is irreparably broken. The boys, now teenagers, are caught in a loyalty trap they did not create. The sons, Ethan and Josh, are in therapy. They lost their father, then lost their mother to the state, and are now trying to rebuild a relationship with a woman who is a stranger, haunted by a past they were forced to believe was a lie. A 2022 follow-up article in the Cedar Springs Sentinel quoted a family friend saying, "The boys are quiet. There's a lot of anger there, but no place to put it." Lisa Miller received a state wrongful imprisonment settlement of $2.5 million. "The money is meaningless," she has said. She moved to a different state. She sees her sons during painfully structured visits. She told a journalist, "I come home to an empty house, just like I did for 7 years in prison. The door isn't locked now, but some days it feels the same." The system's failure was not one of malice, but of a tragic cascade. The dismissal of an ambient sound, the forgetting of a physical print, the overwhelming psychological pressure to fit the puzzle pieces into a known picture, the discontented wife, rather than acknowledge the terrifying shape of the unknown. This crime was driven by a long-festering need for revenge. But do you believe Jenner's primary goal was to punish David, or to inflict maximum suffering on his entire family as he felt had suffered? And beyond the overlooked palm print, what was the single biggest psychological bias that blinded investigators to the truth for so long? If you're interested in the psychology and stories behind real crimes, subscribe to Behind the Crime Files for more deep dives into cases where the truth was hiding in plain sight. We explore the human decisions, both by criminals and by those tasked with solving crimes, that shape these tragic stories.